Welcome, everyone, to Paranormal Roundtable. I am your host, Josh Turner, and with me is Anthony.
Good evening.
This is the Thursday edition of our beloved show, the podcast. This is the podcast, folks. If you're listening to us on the podcast, which I know a lot of you are, and you refuse to go to YouTube for Fridays and Sundays because you just refuse to go. I don't know why, but we get a lot of people that go anyway without you, so we're not missing you at all. Now, seriously, we'd like you to. We'd like you to come and join the what's going on with the rest of the people. 3 hours on Friday, 3 hours on Sunday. Friday, we have a guest that comes on the live stream every Friday. And then on Sunday, we retell people's stories. Same thing we do on Tuesday. Tuesdays, it's a 1 hour, and you're getting the podcast 1 hour where you get 3 hours on Sunday, Friday, and Sunday. But you get a little more of us, me, Anthony, and Tony. We're like, you know.
It's a little bit more like personal and interactive.
You can ask questions, and we can answer them. And you know, there's just all kinds of, you can interact with the other listeners, ask questions, learn things. It's a learning experience, I think. And
it's just kind of looser too, because we have 2.5 to 3 hours to play around with, whereas here on these pre-records we got to kind of laser focus everything in within an hour.
Yeah, and you can see me, like, apparently I'm losing my mind on there, and I'm going crazy. But that's okay. That's just people that don't like me, all 5 of them. That's fine. They don't like me, but 80,000 people do, so that's all that matters. So what I'm going to tell you tonight, we have a guest. It's going to be cool. We're going to bring him on, but first let me tell you about the Patreon. The Patreon is a $10, $20, $30, $40, $50 tier. $10 after 2 months, you get a swag bag. $20 after you sign up, you get a swag bag instantly. And you get an autographed book with both of those. But at a $30 tier, you get 2 autographed books from different authors. If you get the $40 tier, you get one from me and one from someone else. And then $50 tier, you get 2 from me, both of my books, the werewolves and the Dogman phenomena, and then the Bigfoot phenomena. And then you get a book from one of many other authors, Barton Nunley, Ken Gerhard, Lyle Blackburn, Nick Redfern, David Weatherly, just Chad Lewis. It goes on and on. Most of those are cryptid authors. Somebody asked me why. I said, well, David and Chad do ghost books too, but most of those are cryptid authors. But people don't realize that Barton does a lot of ghosts because he lived in a haunted house. So I encourage everyone to go and aggravate him about his ghost encounters. He doesn't like to retell them. So go ahead and aggravate him and tell him Josh Turner sent you. He'll know.
Yeah, just show up in his live stream.
Just show up and be like, hey, what about your ghost? I heard that you were really scared. Tell us about the ghost. He doesn't like talking about it. So
and just keep asking it over and over in the live chat of his live stream.
Tell him what happened to you when you were in the shower.
Yeah.
Tell him you want to know now. Because that's how people are. You told not to mess with something, you go and mess with it. At least I was that way always.
Like wet paint sign, they put their finger on it. Is that wet? Oh, I guess
cement,
it is.
You go stomping in it.
Well, who'd have thunk it was wet?
But so we have fun on the show, right? Everybody knows that. So what we're going to talk about today is going to be insurance premiums, and we're going to do a little bit of we're going to talk about
an extended car warranty,
your car's extended warranty, and probably try to sell you on a timeshare. All the great things in life. Just kidding, just joking. We're joking. So join the Facebook group, Paranormal Roundtable Facebook group. It's free. Just go over there. People are dropping stories all the time on there, and then people are like, hey, it's this, it's that. And you can post pictures if you want. I personally don't. People have asked me about pictures. I have a lot of them. I don't post them. Why? Because of AI. And then a bunch of arguing will start. And so this is our guest, Ernie DeVoe. You want to say hi, Ernie?
Hello, everybody.
So, Ernie, where are you from?
I'm originally from Massachusetts. Right now, I'm in Ohio.
Okay. Cool. And so he's our guest, and he's going to tell us some stuff. So without further ado, let's get started, and let's get started with Ernie DeVoe.
Yeah, I don't know where we'd like me to start on this here.
Well, from the very beginning, I mean, did you have experiences as a child, or when did?
Well, everything that happened to me in my younger years growing up hunting, I wasn't really aware of what I was seeing out there in the woods. We came across tracks, which we have our hunting party, or if I found, structures or anything like that, we just kind of washed it off. But, my brother and I, after this encounter, I just started putting it all together and realizing that they've always been up around where we were hunting. I wasn't aware of it back then, being 10, 11 years old and hunting with the rest of the adult guys in our hunting party. Just my brother and I were the youngest ones. But we had seen tracks in the snow, but we just washed it off. We were told we had to leave the area, and we never thought about it again. Particularly me, I never thought about it again until after my encounter. Then I started putting them all the different things that happened back together again. The area that I chose to hunt by myself, this was about 36 years ago. I picked it because it was very steep in legend or history of things happening in that area. Even though I didn't really believe it, I knew that other people were afraid to go in there. And because of that, I was pretty much guaranteed that I'd be the only guy in there hunting. Everybody else was afraid. So I had gone into this area. I had scouted it out numerous times. And that morning, I basically knew that where the deer would be bedded down, which way the wind would be blowing over the east side of the mountain, or whether it was going westward. But it was in my favor that morning. I chose to come in from the opposite side of an old farm that was on the other side of a mountain. It had a big apple orchard there. So I proceeded to go in there, probably about close to probably a 3 mile walk up the back and forth up the Drake Mountain. And I got about maybe a little bit more than halfway on an old trail, and I jumped a bunch of deer, and they went over the top of the ridge. So that ridge line ran right across the top of Drake Mountain, and on the top up there was a brook that came out. So because I jumped them, I knew that in order for me to harvest one, I'm going to have to ambush them. I'm going to have to figure out a way to get out in front of them, and which I proceeded to do. It took me probably not even maybe a half mile, or maybe less. I was right in that area there. We're at the top of that trail, actually dog legs back around the other side and down back again. But I had gotten up to that ambush point that I wanted to get to, and there was a stone wall that ran across from my position over to where that brook came out, where the dog leg came back down around the side of the mountain. And I just squatted down just a little bit because I could hear the deer coming through the saplings. And I knew they'd be coming over this stone wall. There was a couple of big old pine trees there, but they were spaced out pretty far. And I had taken a look a little bit as I got into my position to make sure that there wasn't anything that I was going to scare out of there, like a squirrel or whatever, to warn the deer. I didn't see anything at that point. It was right after I actually started concentrating more on them deer coming over the stone wall that I noticed movement out of my peripheral vision on my left side at about 35 yards out. And whatever it was laying next to a tree. I thought that it perhaps might have been a buck laying there. And I figured that was going to be a pretty easy shot. But in that state, you can't shoot them while they're laying down. You got to wait for them to stand up. So I drew up on it, but I was still watching, that other area where the deer, I expect them to come over the stone wall. And it got up a little bit more. And at that point, I figured that it wasn't a deer anymore. It was possibly a bear because of the body size. And I had no permit for a bear. I was just a bit concerned that if it did spot me, because it had its head around the other side of the tree, that it might bum rush me, So I kept it in my peripheral, but I started watching more towards that stone wall. I had to get a shot off at those deer there, and I noticed again that this thing actually scooched up next to the tree, head still around the other side, opposite from me, and started getting up a little bit, look more like a guy, So now I'm a little bit concerned in a different way that he doesn't know I'm there. I don't know what he was doing laying down. Maybe he got in there early in the dark in the morning, and he was just setting up, and he heard them coming through, and he's getting up now. And I don't want him taking a shot at deer that run between him and I, because it's mostly everybody uses shotguns in the state of Massachusetts, and a lot of guys use buckshot. I don't, but they use buckshot, and I didn't want to get shot, particularly at 35 yards away. And so I decided I was going to just move up about 2-3 feet. I was still hunched down, but I was able to move up 2-3 feet. And then I started watching over the stone wall again. And again, I noticed this guy getting up even more, even taller. And I started really thinking about that, and that this was a big guy. This was a really big guy. And he was really close to the tree, like hugging the tree. He had his right arm around the tree. And it was about at that point that all hell broke loose on the other side of the stone wall where the saplings were. I could hear what sounded like boulders crashing and branches snapping and everything else going on there. And at that point, it stuck its head around my side of the tree, swung its right leg out to my side of the tree, like it was peering over that stone wall, and it caught me in its peripheral. And when it caught me in its peripheral, it looked over at me, and then it looked back over that stone wall, and then it snapped its head right back at me, like it couldn't believe I was standing there. He must have just picked me up out of his peripheral by coincidence, and he couldn't believe I was standing there. And I really couldn't believe that he was standing there either, but I knew I had to take in some information here, and particularly when he was still close to that tree, I was looking for a mark on the tree, a little piece of moss or a little twig sticking out of that tree where I could later on, if things went well for me, I could go over there and measure that spot on the tree. And I found a piece of moss on there, just level with his head. And so he faced me broadside. He looked right directly at me and faced me, looking right at me. And he put both his hands up, about chest high, elbows bent in, palms facing me, fingers straight up in the air, and pumped them twice. And my mind was racing, Josh. My mind was completely racing there. I'm saying to myself, oh, I knew what it was, even though I'd never seen one. I knew what it was, but I was thinking to myself, oh, I got to suck in this information. And it's one thing if I were to tell people that I've seen a Bigfoot, that's pretty easy in my opinion, But now it's pumping its arms. So now I'm thinking to myself, this is getting bizarre here. I don't know what's going to happen. I checked my wristwatch. I had my 12 gauge full up on him. He started pumping his arms, so I brought my 12 gauge down. He knew how to approach me. I know this today. He knew how to approach me. And he started walking towards me. And now I'm deeply concerned because I don't know which way it's going to go. 35 yards, and he's closing the gap. And I know there's more on the other side of that stone wall. I know what was going on. He was set up at a pinch point. These other ones ambushed these deer. And I just didn't know which way it was going to go. So as he walked towards me, he took his right hand, his fist, and used his pointer finger and pointed towards my chest, then pointed towards his chest. And again, I got to tell you, my head is spinning. I'm going, hey, no, there isn't anybody who's going to ever believe this. But I'm trying to take all the information, and this is just out there. I'm trying to remain calm because I know when I tell you how big this thing was, I knew that there was no way that I was going to be able to run out of there. That would have been foolish. I would have been like a rabbit being chased by coyotes on the buffet table. He continued walking towards me. And again, with his hands, he put his hands out, waist level, elbows bent, palms down. And then he turned both hands over, palms up. And I'm like, okay, there's going to be some point where it's going to want me to do something, you know? And he continued to walk towards me. And he pointed over my shoulders, once over my left shoulder, once over my right shoulder. And by that time, he had closed the gap pretty much. I had my shotgun down, but I was dropping my hand slowly to my sidearm. And I just had a purchase on the grip with my palm, just had my palm hit the grip. And he stuck his hand out. He looked at me and stuck his hand out in front of me, palm up, and pointed to his palm. I looked at him again. I was below his shoulder. I looked at him again, and he tapped his palm. So I let go of my handgun. I took note of his palm. I focused in on his palm. And the information that I got while he was walking over in that point there, he had blue eyes. He's 7 foot 8 inches tall. I measured that off on the tree. I actually thought I got a runt. You know, I thought these things were much, much bigger. I was a little disappointed there. The hair, the face, I mean, at that distance, it was unmistakable. The blue eyes still stick out to me. But the other odd thing was its palm, the same kind of palm we have, but it didn't have a lifeline on his palm. And that really, really hammered me in a way why it wanted me to pay attention to its palm. Some people think that it was trying to tell me to stay there or maybe give it something. But when I tell you the rest of this, you're gonna think maybe a little bit differently. And some people ask me, you know, was there a portal? Well, if it was a portal, it would have ran through the portal, but you'll hear this part in a second. It did something else. It looked back towards I repeated the gestures on what I felt was something that I knew. The gesture between me and itself, it pointed to me first, to my chest, was we're equal. You know, you would do that if you were guys will do that. You know, if you want to challenge somebody, you know, there's a way you can do that with your finger. You know, but the way he was doing is he knew how to approach me. And that's scary for people. They should, you know, I don't know if they've ever listened to 411 David Pleiades there, but I believe that some of these people were won over by whatever it was. But he looked back over that stone wall and he put both his hands up to his mouth like you would cup your hands almost to yell. And he whooped 3 times with a second and a half in between each whoop. Now, it's been many, many years, and I never heard anybody say they actually seen him whoop, but I seen it. And then he did something else, is he whistled. And now, being in the hunting party, we use those whistles once in a while, and this sounds just like a guy in a hunting party. He sounded exactly like another person that was whistling, and it was a come on over here whistle, but he pointed back in the direction that he had originally come from with me. And he looked back at me one last time and kind of nodded his head, and he didn't run, he didn't jog, he just smoothly, very smoothly walked back the way he came in an additional probably 40 yards or so beyond that and stopped and turned back towards me. And I got to tell you, that's when I heard on the other side of that stone wall something crashing right through them saplings like they were like a rhino or something. It was just tearing them up, and it was coming, and it was headed right towards him. And as soon as it broke that tree line where the saplings were, I picked it up. I seen what it was, and it was another one. And this one was smaller, taller than me, but smaller than that one there. It was a hair above its shoulders, so I figured that'd probably be like maybe 6'8", 6'9", something like that. But it was cinnamon colored. The one that was over near me was, a lot of people say they have black hair, but I've seen people with extremely dark brown hair, and it looks black, looks like black hair, but it's not. And the sun was shining on the one that walked over to me's hair. I was that close. I could see that. I could see that its skin texture, its fingernails, everything. And this other one, though, it ran over to this big one, and they started doing that murmuring thing, and I had never heard that before until I heard the Sierra sounds, and I just about fell out of my chair when I heard that. I just wanted to scream to Ron Moorhead that you don't know what you got, buddy. As nobody's ever seen him do that samurai chatter or murmur thing. I watched them. They had a little conversation going on there, and the big one pointed me out to this other one, and it bent its head down below a little branch on this sapling that stuck out that obscured its view from me a little bit, and it did a double take on me. I don't think that they. I think I just got the jump on the two of them unknowingly. They were just as surprised at me as I was at them. And then the big one did something else again, as he pointed to the littler one's chest and basically told him, "You go that way," like in a flanking maneuver on me. And he pointed to his own chest and said he was going to go that way again on basically a flanking maneuver that you would do on somebody. Why they would do that, I don't know, other than the fact is maybe because they got a deer over there, they wanted to keep me away from that, make sure I didn't try to take it. So that was at the point that I sucked it up and went over to the tree that it was originally standing by and measured off on that tree that it was, I stood right next to it so I could put my hand up there, and then I measured up from my hand with my fingers 7'8", and then I could see where it was just a little tiny bit of a knoll. So it was like an old vernal pool that you get in the springtime, so it had ferns growing around it where they were pushed down. There was no track. It was just on the ferns themselves. So I decided I have to measure that off to correlate that with the marking on the tree. I figured if I do get out of here someday, I'll be able to tell this story as accurately as I possibly can. And I took a big step, and I couldn't even come close to it. So I backed up and took a little bit of a jump, and I still fell short of it. And I took a couple feet back and did a little bit of a running jump, and I still fell short of it. So it was definitely measured off the same as it would have been if it was 7'8" tall. And that's pretty much it. I had seen sign in that area before, scouting it. I had gone up there in the dead of winter in that Drake Brook that pops out at the top of the mountain there. As I was tracking a set of deer, I have a tiny little set of binoculars so I don't have to walk on those tracks. The tracks seemed to have disappeared at one spot, and I picked up right at the Drake Brook there a spot on the Drake Brook that was a little bit frozen over, but there was a hole punched in the ice. So I went down next to it, watching it in my binoculars there, and I didn't see any tracks around. I thought maybe it was poachers, because we had gone in for poachers in my past, the warden would get us to go in where he didn't want to go in. And as I was looking at that hole punched in the ice, I noticed that just out of my reach, there was a mountain laurel branch that was snapped off and then tossed back into the mountain laurel bush there. And I could see where it was used to scrub tracks out. So I immediately thought that was a poacher, and never even considered the fact that was one of them. That was a Bigfoot or a Sabe, whatever anybody wants to call it. I just washed it off. I could care less. But the whole area is, as it turned out, I was in the epicenter of a lot of sightings in that area, and particularly the Cobble Mountain region area, which has some spooky things that have happened around there. You know, one of them being the what they called the Black Lady or whatever. You know, all shrouded in black. There's two people that were lost their lives up there. They were found broken necks. Nobody knows how that happened. You know, did they fall off some of these boulders? Because going up there, there's a lot of boulders that are there and flat rocks that you have to walk on. These flat rocks that can be slippery. So perhaps maybe they slipped and broke their neck. I don't know. But like I said, it never bothered me. And when you're younger and you're armed with a 12 gauge and a sidearm, and you know, you're pretty much ready to spend a couple nights in the woods if you have to, you're just not really that afraid anymore. And I wasn't, you know. I just never believed in them until that happened. The whole thing has just evolved into, you know, people never believed that they got up in trees. They thought they were too heavy. Well, I can show you trees where I could probably easily pick an engine up out of a car. You know, they're huge trees. What I heard was something came out of the trees. Those deer were driven into that pinch point area, ambush area, and something came out of the trees and had a knockdown drag out with them in there. Either hit them with branches or boulders. I could hear rocks. So I would imagine that's exactly what they were doing, is they got a couple of deer. And I would also imagine, even though I only seen two, there had to be more than two driving those deer in that area. But since then, all I do now is kind of take eyewitness encounters, because I'm actually looking for certain things. I know they communicate. Native Americans, if you had, let's say, an Apache and you had a Mohawk, they didn't know each other's language. So how did they communicate? The same with the voyeurs, the trappers from Hudson Bay Company. Same exact thing. You know, when they traveled around, they didn't speak all these different languages. They had to use sign language. This thing knew how to approach me, and that has to be sitting back in people's minds, that could this really be the reason why some people have disappeared? Did they just walk off with them, or were they abducted by a bad one? It appears that this thing was a good one in a lot of aspects, because it just the way it acted towards me. And I would imagine that if it wasn't, I wouldn't be speaking right now, because there was no way, Josh, that my sidearm, I would have had to definitely put it up underneath its neck. Definitely. And I would have been in trouble with the other ones, but that would have been a hopeful thing that it dropped it right there. The 12 gauge, yeah, a well-placed shot, but I don't think it would have slowed it down. This thing had to weigh 500 plus pounds. It was built like you can't imagine seeing a human being, even Andre the Giant. I mean, if that guy even if Andre worked out, and this was bigger than Andre, even if Andre worked out, he would never have been gotten to be cut up like that. I've never seen anybody cut up like that size before. So I'm figuring that this thing could have very easily taken somebody like Andre and just picked him up and flung him. Never mind me. He could have just grabbed me by my neck and pulled an arm off and made a wish or whatever on me. But that's pretty much it. It's taken me a lot of years to actually go back into the woods. I had the opportunity to sit down with a gentleman at a powwow, a real powwow, and his name happened to be the same as mine. His name is Chief Ernest, and people can look that up. I believe he is the great-great-great-grandson of, I want to say, Sitting Bull. And we spoke together, and he wanted to hear my story, and I told him, and he asked me a bunch of questions if there was water around, and then he told me, he said, they have always known you. They've always watched you, and I believe that they watch everybody that goes out in the woods. You know, people think that they're just going to spot one of these. Go try to find a deer first or a rabbit. These things, they take the high ground, and they know everything that's going on out there. You're not going to, unless a coincidence like mine, you know, they just, everything was in my favor that morning. And I believe that's why that happened. And I hope some people actually, it helps them in their venture, in their research. Because trust me, going around banging on a tree and whooping, you're only telling them where you are. You know, they're thinking you're crazy. That's like walking up and knocking on somebody's door and running away. You know, don't knock on my door repeatedly and run away every time. But that's just me, you know. People have to take that next step, and go do what I call the Jane Goodall effect. You know, Jane Goodall didn't know that there was gorillas up on that mountain until she heard from eyewitnesses, and then she had to go up there and basically win them over. You know, wait for them to come to her, and then she had to figure out a way to communicate with them. Everybody that goes out there right now, they run around the woods whooping and screaming and banging on trees with their little wood knockers. That's not going to do it. These things are just laughing at you.
If you're lucky, that's all they're doing is laughing at you.
Exactly.
Yeah, because people do come out and they say, well, you know, one of them chased me out of the woods, but I was able to outrun it. I assure you, I have shot deer on the run, and it's not an easy task. You can do it, obviously, but this thing here, particularly that second one that I saw run over to the first one, my gosh, Josh, this thing was like a parkour runner. He was smooth as silk, running through the woods, cutting over that brook and up to the other one. There was no bobbing or anything. It was just smooth and fast. And if this thing wanted to catch a deer, it could catch a deer. You'd be like telling me that you can outrun a deer. Well, I'll get a knife for you. Go get one. It's not going to happen. So, you know, how long can they run? Well, you know, they don't have to run real long if they can outrun a deer.
Yeah. This area where you were at, Ernie, was there, like you said, there were other people who had encounters there?
Yes, there was. There was a lady that I got in touch with about 2 years ago that they actually own. She was a daughter of the people who own the apple orchard on the other side of the mountain. She had actually responded to another podcast that I was on. And she told me that before her dad had passed away, and her mom told her the story. They were from Germany, I believe. So he spoke very little English, but he worked at Bradley International Airport. So he took the back road from that farm over to Bradley International Airport. And one night, pretty much exactly where I was parked on the opposite side of the road where that mountain is, he told his wife, and he never ever told anybody else ever again, and described it, that this thing came out of the woods right there at the bottom of the mountain and ran across the road into the Cobble Mountain reservoir area. And he described it to a T. And then there was another one that I haven't been able to find this guy yet. The friends of mine told me that I know his name, but I don't even know if he's living, that his father owned a junkyard there, and he used to hunt in that area, and he stopped hunting altogether because he had an encounter almost identical to mine right in that area. That's the area where they have historically, where they had found two hunters with their necks broken, and it's along a long trail line called Unkemit's Path that nobody really knows about, and it's never really used. It's disappeared into history up there, but if you know where to look, and you can follow some of it, and it leads part of that trail out to where I grew up in the Montgomery-Toccoa Mountain area. And again, that's about 10 miles from there. They had a problem in that area at a Shadrack pond. And the two people that lived there, an older couple, they had called the constable because they had heard somebody behind their house from that Shadrack pond area, what they thought was yelling for help. And the constable was in the town that I grew up, very, very small town. I think it was like 38 people in the town. But he went up there and didn't see anything. So it happened again another night, the next night. And he got in contact with my father. Now, I knew that constable's daughter. Everybody's family knew everybody around there. And because my father was a Korean War vet, I guess, as he got my father to go up there with him because maybe he was a little antsy about it himself. And again, there wasn't anything. There wasn't anything there. And it happened 3 nights in a row. And on the third night, they called the state troopers in the Russell Police Barracks. And that's just down the mountain from Toccoa Mountain. It overlooks Russell, the town of Russell. And they went up there. They didn't find anything. And about 2 days later, the same thing happened again, and his wife called the Russell police and the constable and my father, and they went up there and they found her husband about 25 feet in the mud with his neck broken, no tracks. So nobody ever talked about it up there, you know. I don't know why you would have figured something would have been going on, but a lot of really strange things have happened up around those areas along that Unkemit's Path. Myself and another guy suspected that what they do is they do migrate, you know, maybe not a long distance. People say, well, they don't migrate. Well, they're following a food source. You don't get that big from eating mushrooms. You know, you're eating meat and supplementing it with other things. And we have come across this where we were suspecting them to move through the area where I had my encounter, and they did. In that Cobble Mountain region area, there's a cemetery there, and that's called Warfield Cemetery, and that dates all the way back to the Underground Railroad. And there's a bunch of headstones in there that say killed by the beast. And there's been a lot of sightings, other sightings in that area. You're not allowed to be in there. The town that's adjacent to that is called Blanford. I used to have a store there, and they were asked by the state to take that off the map, take that cemetery off the map. And instead what they did was they made another cemetery and called it Warfield. So there's 2 cemeteries there. Nobody knows where the second cemetery is except the townsfolk, and doubt very much they're going to talk about it. I've also had a gentleman who's passed away. He passed away over 30 years ago, 35, 36 years ago anyways. and he was a freelance photographer for the Westfield Evening News, and he was doing it for them because he liked that was his hobby, and they gave him free 35 millimeter film for his cameras, and he was up there and he took photographs of the Sabe or the Sasquatch right up there in that region, and brought it to them to have them develop it and everything, and they confiscated the pictures, and that was it. He was out of his job, his freelancing job for the Westfield Evening News, but he was a good friend of mine, and when he told me, I didn't really believe it. I mean, he had no pictures. I wasn't really into that. And then I had a lady stop into my store, and she has been on a podcast. I've been trying to get in touch with her. She stopped in early in the morning. I thought maybe she was having a seizure, an epileptic seizure. I had to smell her breath to make sure she wasn't drinking. She was, I don't know how many people have ever found somebody lost in the woods, but they're usually very, very white, and they're pretty dehydrated from sweating, and you can tell they're scared out of their minds, and that's what this lady was. She was scared out of her mind. It actually came down off of the part of the mountain there and went to run across the road, but stopped right in front of her car and came over and slammed its hands on the hood of her car. And she came into my store like within, I'd say 8 minutes, 10, I'd say 8 to 15 minutes of it happening, and started telling us, recounting that story to us. But, you know, I knew she was being serious. That's what she thought she had seen. But until it happens to you, you can't wrap your head around it. And when something like this happens to you, where this thing is using basically sign language, who's going to believe that? You know, like I said, it would have been way easier for me to just say, hey, I seen a Sasquatch. Way easier. But this part here, I guess it was meant to be to let people know that they are very smart. They are definitely the apex predator in there. We are not even ready to go in there and hunt one down. You'd be hunted by them. You would not come back from something like that. It wouldn't bode well, Josh.
Yeah, I've heard people say a lot of crazy things about how they look for them and they're going to go and hunt them and they're going to do this and they're going to do that.
No.
I mean, and I know people who do actually track them and things like that, but yeah. I'm not going to be one of them. I can tell you that. That's not my thing, man.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we don't know, if you've hunted before, then you've tracked deer and things like that. And it appears that some things can disappear, but when tracks disappear, your life has been extended if you can turn around and walk back. You were meant to stop exactly right there. That whatever it is that you're tracking is close by. And considering the fact is these things can outrun a deer, I'm figuring that they can probably pretty much out jump one. And deer can jump like 20, 24 feet on a run. Maybe more than that. So you'd have to really be a pretty darn good tracker to come up on one. And then to figure that you're going to hunt them down, this thing could probably use a 25-pound boulder off of a rock and pitch it at you like it was a little softball, kill you with it.
Well, I get stories too, and Anthony, you can attest to this. We had the one guy telling us that he had shot at one, emptied out his 9mm, which was
wow, yeah.
And then he was like, "But I still have my Bowie knife." Well, regardless, it doesn't matter. That story never made the show, and it's not going to. And when I didn't put it on, he was aggravated, and he said some things about me. But I'm like, look, I have a hard time believing that you're going to go out there and shoot up one with a 9mm and then go after it with a Bowie knife. I just. And then according to him, he actually did take one down, and I'm just like, really? Come on, dude.
Sometimes a 9mm doesn't even stop a man after a few rounds. Like you'll see them just keep coming.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. I can tell you that right now. I thought about that with the sidearm. My only hope if I would have got tangled up with it, was to put it right up underneath its chin, right underneath its neck, and try to shoot it right straight up through the head. And what were my chances of doing that at something that tall, without it grabbing my arm, being that close? There's no way. Yeah. I'm not thinking there would have been anyways. And my 12 gauge, I'm thinking I would have, take a grizzly on with a 12 gauge. Unless you hit it just right, you're in a world of hurt, And I do realize that this story here, it can get to me. It can kind of aggravate me because I've got so much information in it. When I first put this story out there, it was only been about 2.5 years. People were like, well, they don't eat meat. They go through portals. Well, maybe they do go through a portal. But these two weren't going. If they wanted to go through a portal, they would have gone through a portal. They didn't do that. They ran. They basically tried to flank me or whatever they were doing, and to say they don't eat meat. Well, they weren't out there, Indian leg wrestling with deer in the woods or
well, the thing is too, Ernie, I'm going to say this to the entire audience, even if they are metaphysical, which I think that a lot of them, a lot of encounters that we get, they are. I mean, if you look at it, but that doesn't preclude them.
They still have to eat.
They still have to drink. Eat. That's something that I had gone over with the late Linda Godfrey. We both came to that conclusion, like separately. Like we talked about it one day, and then I had talked about it with Barton Nunley and with several other people who've had, Ron Moorhead included.
Yep.
You mentioned him earlier, but that doesn't mean that they don't eat. Like I lived in a house, okay, that was haunted. I mean, 1,000%. We had 3 different paranormal, groups coming. One was from San Antonio, another one was from here, and they were like 100% it was haunted. They couldn't tell us anything about what to do. They were just like, well, it's haunted. See ya. Nothing they could tell me. I finally met a guy who helped me get, deal with it. But it was the 4th person that had offered to help, and he was able to actually do a little bit of something, but there was still activity. It just wasn't as negative. But these things could manifest as physical. We had plates get thrown at people, and we had the refrigerator door just fly open on more than one occasion. The TV would turn up and down. I got smacked on my back, and then a light fixture struck me on top of the head, which I've talked about on the show, and I was talking crap. I was like, I'm not afraid of this ghost, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to call Ghostbusters. Boom, right on my head. If these things, these spirits can slap you, throw you across a room, which I've literally walked into an investigation with 4 people, and we saw a blender like fly up in the air and a washing machine bounce around in front of us. It was poltergeist activity, and it was on a Dogman case. Like, these things can do physical things. And if they choose to manifest in a physical way, if that is what we're dealing with, and I don't even say 100% that is, I don't know. But, why would it be so hard to believe that they're not going to eat meat? They're going to eat meat. When people tell you that they know the diet of a Dogman or a Bigfoot or any of these creatures, I just laugh. I'm like, how do you know that? Like, how do you know that they don't eat meat? I would look at them and assume if they're that big and they're on our plane of existence, they're probably going to eat meat. And even if they walk through a portal, I mean, physical beings walk through portals. I mean, I've gotten reports of reptilians and all kinds of things walking through portals, and they're as flesh and blood as you and I. So I don't know what that matters, whether or not I'm just going to look at it as like they're on our plane of existence. They're manifesting as physical. They're probably going to eat, and they're probably going to poop, and they're going to pee, and they're going to sleep, and whatever else. But they do have a hyper ability that we don't have. And I can tell you, you can look at the mass of these creatures and see from so many encounters I've gotten of just talk about Bigfoot for a minute, specifically Bigfoot, massive, huge creatures with 4 to 5 foot, wide,
Exactly.
And how can you even contemplate, one of my friends, he's a researcher and an author. He's very, very, actually, he's pretty famous in the community. I love him dearly, but he told me one day, a few months ago, he's like, these things are giant squirrels. I said, no, they're not. They're not giant squirrels. I'm sorry. I don't believe that. I mean, he goes, well, you've never seen one. And I'm like, you haven't either. I mean, you've heard a lot of reports and so have I. And he's He's been doing this probably 15 years longer than me, which is a long time, but I've been doing the dog man thing for a long time, and I know what I saw, and that thing was definitely physical looking, and it manipulated a fence. Now, my friend's brother said it had a vapor coming off the back of its neck, which that could be something metaphysical, but it could still manipulate a fence, and I still believe in my heart that it wanted to eat me. And people will tell me these silly things. They're like, well, if it wanted to eat you, it would have. Okay. I also, when I got even anywhere, I just ran from that point. I was gone, like I'm done, I just, once it was there by the fence and my friend's dad came out, I was gone. And I was like, I'm not going to wait around to see if it's going to eat me or not eat me. I didn't give it a chance. And it was judging the fence. Now, physical or metaphysical, like I said, if it's on our plane of existence, it's probably playing by our rules. So yeah, there's a lot of different things that are going on there. And I'm not going to take a chance. I'm not even going to take a chance. I'm not going to err, and make an error, like you got to err on the side of caution. That was smart of you not to try to shoot it because, we've gotten reports too, and Anthony, bunches of reports. What is this black stuff that comes off of them?
Yeah.
I mean, like you'll shoot it, and these ranchers was one in Wyoming.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, go ahead. Good.
It's reported as like black dirt or like black vapor,
gunpowder. Almost,
yeah, like gunpowder that comes off of them, and instead of like fur or blood. I mean, it's weird.
Well, let me ask you this, Anthony and Ernie. While I got you here, Ernie,
yeah.
I want to know your opinion on this because, and it's something we have a mutual in Matt. And I've talked to Matt about this. What is this stuff that comes off of them? Is this carbon? Like maybe because they're adjusting to our world and becoming more physical? Because there was a theory that I had talked to Barton Nunley and David Weatherly about. We were on the phone one day, and we were going over a case. It might have been David's case. It was one of these cases where this happened. There was this black dust stuff, and we're contemplating trying to figure out what this is. We're just kind of kicking it around, and you're getting more and more reports of this. And I believe there was another person who had told me, I think it was Jesus Payan, but I could be wrong. Apologies if I'm wrong, but I think it was him. But we were talking about it, and there again when Barton and I interviewed him. Or maybe it was Robert Kreider. I'm sorry. Anyway, I can't remember. I talked to a lot of people, but I've talked to many people about these theories. And I want to know your opinion because there was this case that I had covered, with this black dust type stuff. A few weeks later, this thing was shot and it bled. See, and I believe it was the same creature because it was the same one going into this pass where these people lived, and it was harassing them. And this guy kind of ambushed it, and he's like, I'm going to try again. Which to me, that takes a lot of cojones. I don't think I could even go and do what him and his son did, but they had to because it had killed like several steer, and they knew it was the same creature. It was only one creature, and it had a very distinct look about it. It had a scar on its face. And so they had gotten close enough to see that. And there now the eye thing, the eyes were yellow. They remember the eyes being very yellow and then glowing at night. When this thing was shot, okay, the first time on the shoulder, there was this dust or whatever. And this thing just appeared one day and started harassing these people in Wyoming. Now, think about this. 4 weeks go by. They said it wasn't quite a month. It was like about 4 weeks worth of time. And they shot it again. And this thing bled. And it fled into the woods and it never came back. Now, did this thing like have time to generate enough to be like us? Is that what happened? Because the timing was very curious for me. What are your thoughts on that, guys? I mean, I've wondered about this one.
I do. And after meeting our mutual friend, Matt, because I was actually listening to one of his podcasts, somebody's podcast, and they had Matt on, and I caught the tail end of it, not the beginning, just about the tail end of it. And I said, I got to listen to that again because I've always told people that after what's happened to me, I can't discount anything. I really can't.
Oh yeah.
You could tell me that a pterodactyl just landed in your yard, and I'm going out there. I got to go see this because I believe it because it could be. I can't say this is real and that's not real. But after hearing Matt, I decided I was going to listen to it from the beginning, and I listened to the whole thing again from the very beginning. I immediately had to call up the individual his podcast that he was on there. I said, I need his number. Give me his number. I immediately called Matt up and started to, because I know a real, somebody really eyewitnesses something. You can tell by, I don't know, you just get that feeling. You can tell from their voice, and that it's real. And absolutely, I was convinced that what he seen was real. And I was saying to myself, like, gosh, I hope not, because I would not. That'd be one thing. That Sasquatch is one thing. The dog man, I don't think there's a good way out of that one there, man. But to answer your question, yeah, I do. Even though I say I didn't see a portal or anything, I'm not going to discount it, because there's an interesting movie that's out there, and it's called Lucy with Morgan Freeman.
Oh yeah, I've seen it.
And in the beginning of that movie, he goes into quantum physics and how the mind works and everything. And that's something that Ron Moorhead started getting into. So I watched that, and to compare a dog to a human being, and I think it's like 10% that a human being can use, a dog can use like 3 or 4%. And we think we're the apex on there. We're the big geniuses. We're the thinkers, and we can control more stuff with our minds or whatever. We're infants, really, compared to a dolphin. Actually, a dolphin utilizes more of their awareness, their mind, than we do. So what's to say? I mean, if you watch that movie Lucy, what happens at 25%? What's to say that they can't use 25%? And when they can use 25%, then they can alter some things. Just putting it out there, just saying, that is really what's going on. And if they can, then they're just being caught in between being solid and not solid. If you can catch them while they're solid, because their mind has to gear up to change back to whatever it was, then maybe that's going on, Josh. But how do we actually know that? And you've got some fine points there that if ghosts can move things around.
Then, they can assault you.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, they drag people out of bed, and they choke people. Like, I mean, good gosh, man, I've seen some horrific wounds on people that these things have manifested.
Yeah, and you can't fight them. You can't fight something like that. But there's many. I was just speaking with a guy that had an encounter, and I got him to think back further in his life, and he remembers something happened to him while he was camping, and it goes right along with the ability of like in that movie Lucy there, to actually be able to pass through a wall or whatever. Could that be what's going on?
Well, you know what? We're going to have to stop right there, and we'll find out next week when we return with Ernie DeVoe. That's it for tonight, folks. Thank you for tuning in to Paranormal Roundtable. Be sure and check us out on your favorite platform. Spotify is our favorite, along with YouTube. And check us out on Friday and Sunday, where we have our live stream, and we'll be back with Ernie. Thank you and good night.